So our next speaker before the break is Giovanni Esposito. So you can come forward to set it up. So Giovanni Esposito is a professor at the ULB and director of the Centre d'études des politiques et de l'administration publique at the Institute of Sociology. He obtained his master's degree in public policies and economics of institutions at the University of Naples. He later completed a PhD in public management at the University of Liège, where he is also now a senior research associate at the Smart City Institute. His research focuses on public policy and administration, state-citizen interactions, policy process analysis, and critical policy studies. So his talk of today will be about smart city development as public entrepreneurship. So you have now the word.
Thank you. I'm trying to connect with the laptop, with the screen. Doesn't work now. Yes. Okay. I don't see this. Okay, great. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Alessandro, for inviting me. So, I think after listening to the previous talk, the first question I feel to ask myself and to yourself is what a political scientist is doing here on a conference on smart cities. Well, we all agree that technological innovation does not exist in nature, right? So technological innovation is the result of human interactions, humans exchanging ideas, following rules, epistemic rules, on the basis of culture and on the basis of legal norms, okay? And all this is the result of what we usually call, in political science, policy processes, okay? We've seen, for instance, with the first presentation, that one of the main barriers, challenges to projects like this is multi-level coordination, for instance, across the regional level and the municipal level. So our first answer about the question I was asking is this, basically. Political scientists are interested in understanding innovation as a socio-technical process, okay? But let's proceed with order. And again, let's go back to the question, why myself as a political scientist I'm working on smart cities, especially in a field that the literature is pretty clear since the beginning as a buzzword, the smart city, as developed within the context of the corporate world. The word smart city was emerged in 2008 in the IBM context. The objective being to sell ICTs beyond the private sector. And the idea was to exploit an untapped market, which was the market of the public sector. ICTs can be used, as been mentioned across the different presentations today, by the public administration to improve a number of operations, right? And it's exactly in relation to this that people with a background in social sciences are mobilized, okay? As far as my personal story in terms of research is concerned, I've started working on this when I was a postdoctoral research at the Smart City Institute at the University of Liège, the business school of the University of Liège. The Smart City was then and is it still, the academic partner of the Wallonia region, okay, within the implementation of this strategy, which is the Digital Wallonia strategy. The objectives being to support and promote digital innovation across the Walloon municipalities. This was interesting because when I arrived at this institute, I was noticing that the way how smart cities were developed in Belgium was through the impulse, let's say, of public actors, elected officials, civil servants, okay? And so this was a little bit different from what the literature was saying. And indeed, if you look at the way how the literature on smart city policy has evolved through time, you have a first moment in which the focus is on the role of the corporate sector. And then, more and more, the focus becomes on the way how the private, the public, and the academic sectors collaborate to make innovation happen, okay, in the urban settings. And of course, when we speak about public entrepreneurship, is exactly about this, the role of public actors in strategically shaping innovations in urban environments, okay? And the role between these two actors, the public and the private, is for the former, being a strategic actor, providing the vision, okay? If you want, is the role of steering, whereas the private rows, okay? The private implement the innovations. The private has the knowledge to develop technical innovations. So this is the way how I've been meeting, let's say, during my postdoctoral research with the smart cities. But of course, as was mentioned during the first presentation, the Walloon government is not only the government working with smart cities. Already in 2015, the United Nations launched this idea of, contributed to shape the idea of smart city from a public value perspective, so from a public entrepreneurship perspective. So the use of ICTs to improve a number of sustainability dimensions, usually what is called the triple bottom line of sustainability, the social, the economic, and the environmental dimension. And this has been fine-tuned later on with the adoption of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and namely the Goal 11, which is indeed about sustainable cities and communities. And so this is why basically public policy scholars are interested in understanding how ICTs is mobilized by government to address a number of sustainability challenges. So let's go a little bit, let's make rapidly a step backward. What do we mean by public policy? What is a public policy? So basically it's the course of action that the government chooses to undertake to address a problem in society. This is pretty simple, okay? It's the way how public authorities organize themselves in conjunction with other stakeholders to solve societal problems. And so what are the problems which are meant to be addressed through ICTs, through smart cities? Well, the story often starts with demographic changes. Why? Okay, we know that global population is expected to rise in the next years of 2 billions, okay? So we will reach by 2050, 9.7 billion inhabitants on Earth, okay? And actually, the majority of this population is expected to live in cities, which leads to the other piece of the picture, which is urbanization, the increasing urbanization, okay? And indeed, when you break down data on demographic changes, you notice that we live for the first time in history, in a moment in which more of the, over the 50% of the global population lives in cities. Now, when urbanization is poorly managed by governments, independently from the level of government, a number of imbalances emerge. Cities are sites of economic production, which often goes hand in hand with pollution, CO2 emissions. And economic growth also goes hand in hand with, if it's not properly framed within redistributive policies, with economic inequalities. which in urban settlements can lead to, if these inequalities are particularly pronounced, to the increase of criminal rates. Okay, so this is the story behind the way high urbanization is becoming more and more a priority on the governmental agenda, okay, in this particular era. And the last piece of the picture, let's say, is what is usually called digital revolution. Why ICTs are considered to be a viable tool, policy tool, to address these imbalances. Because more and more people spend time on mobiles. So ICTs are a part of our daily life. Actually, more than 1/3 of the our awakening time is on mobiles. Okay, and the idea is to leverage this routinized habit of individuals to address the challenges I was mentioning before. So this is basically the picture, the broad picture within which the Walloon government has been working with and justifying as well its engagement with the smart cities. And this is exactly why more and more there is this idea of speaking of smart city policy. So smart cities as an instrument to address a number of societal problems as those mentioned before. So one of the first things we did when I was doing my postdoc was to understand how municipal governments understand the smart city concept. Alessandro started the session this morning saying, okay, the smart city is a fuzzy idea, it's a nebulous idea. And this was exactly one of the first things we wanted to understand. How we did this? So in 2019, the Walloon regional government launched as a part of the Digital Wallonia strategy this call for projects, okay, which was aimed at allocating financial resources to the municipal governments. The call is called Smart Territory, Territoire Intelligent in French. And the region received 88 project proposals from the municipalities. So, and one of the questions which was asked by the region to the municipalities in the template to apply for funds was the sustainability impact of the project. This was a good occasion to couple technology and sustainability impact aimed by the municipalities. And the sample was interesting because you can see that the projects were coming from all the different 5 provinces of Wallonia. So it was a good, let's say, window of opportunity to understand how this fuzzy concept of smart city was understood and let's say appropriated by municipal government, knowing that, as was mentioned in the first talk, that there are problems of multi-level coordination and of understanding, let's say, among policymakers operating at different levels of government. And now I will show you different articles work we've been doing based on this. So in this first article, so we looked at the different, as I was saying, sorry, at the different technologies which were the most frequent technologies which were proposed in these projects, and the sustainability goals which were aimed at by the municipalities. One of the most common were what we called citizen-facing websites and apps. So basically, the idea was of leveraging ICTs to achieving basically to facilitate the exchange of documents between the public administration and the citizens for a different number of operations, from tax payments to the obtention of permits, in any type of permits. And the declared goal, the declared impact, was, in this case, covering the 3 aspects, let's say, of what it's called the triple bottom line. So achieving reducing the environmental footprint. How? Basically by reducing the number of travels from home and the administration, or by reducing paper usage. Okay, this is the environmental impact which was aimed at first with this technology. But this was, as you can see, not only the only one. By creating these platforms, you reduce the distance basically between government-held information and citizens, okay? Allowing citizens through a click, this was the idea, to access the documents, okay? And so somehow this contributes to what is usually called open data movement, creating portals actually that facilitate the access to this, as I was saying, government-held information. And of course, there was an economic impact which was aimed at as well, which was basically reducing overhead cost. So operational costs related to printing and paper purchasing, and so on and so forth. Another example of technology which was often mentioned in these projects, and this it was mentioned also this morning, is IoT-based sensors to installed both in public and private buildings to monitor the real consumption, the real-time consumption of energy. The idea being, in this case, to reach an environmental and economic goal. How? Basically by optimizing the management of urban infrastructures. Okay? Well, what was interesting doing this work was to understand that there was no one-size-fits-all definition of the smart city policy. Okay, of smart city project. This was actually the point again, which was raised at the introduction of this session. But it was also clear that smart cities are not only about technology. Actually, the technology you mobilize depends on the societal problems you want to address. Okay, and so the relationship between sustainability policies and smart cities is the relationship that exists between ends and means, basically. So the technology is a mean that can facilitate the resolution, let's say, of certain problems in society. It was also interesting to see that different municipalities were conceiving differently the notion of smart cities. Some of them leverage technology to address one of the three bottom line sustainability dimensions, say social rather than economic and environmental. Others were addressing the three altogether, like the first technology that I showed you. So it was clear that the notion of smart cities was place-based, and there was no universal, let's say, understanding of smart city policy. But if a smart city can refer to everything, then it means that it doesn't refer to anything, okay? And actually, much of the literature has been writing about the conceptual ambiguity of smart city. This paper is very nice. I really enjoyed it reading, which is "Will the Real Smart City Please Stand Up?" echoing the Eminem song on the Slim Shady. Why this is interesting and why conceptual ambiguity is a problem? Because when something is unclear, actors have difficulty to coordinate themselves. You cannot set priorities, and from a coordination perspective, it creates a problem. So if innovation is the result of a collaboration between different actors who coordinate action, if the objective is vague, coordination fall apart. Okay, so this is basically the main argument of this stream of the literature, let's say, which is interested on the conceptual ambiguity of smart cities. And so another piece of the research we put forward in the Smart City Institute was about how do local governments deal with ambiguity. And it was interesting to understand that it's true, ambiguity can be a barrier, but ambiguity can be also a resource. Actually, ambiguity can be exploited strategically. And it was the case of this municipality that we studied in this piece of paper where we launched this idea of smart city as public entrepreneurship, where the strategy adopted by the mayor developing the smart city was pretty simple. He said he actually embraced the fuzziness and the ambiguity of the smart city concept. And once he was elected, okay, he had a very strong electoral program in which he promised the use of ICTs to improve urban life, okay? So it was basically joining the smart city movement. His promise was to have this municipality joining the smart city movement. And the first meeting he had with the administrative directors was basically about telling them, look, as long as you can boost sustainability through ICTs, go for it, okay? So the idea was no matter what type of technology you use, as long you use it to boost social, economic, or technological sustainability, or environmental sustainability. And so he had this bottom-up approach coming from within his administrations. The idea that came up from the administration were packed into a European Union proposals. In this case was a European Regional Development Fund. And this is how the smart city was developed in this context. So the ambiguity was embraced. It led the directors to propose solutions which fall within their area of expertise. And this is how they secured EU funds to move forward with the projects. Of course, we've said ambiguity depends on the context. Can be a strength or it can be a weakness. And as we said, as if we go back to the beginning of the story I was telling, the smart city is a concept which has emerged within the corporate environment. And so this ambiguity can actually be, can become a weakness in context in which public administration do not lack, let's say, strategic attitude toward the smart cities. You need a vision about the development of the smart city. Otherwise, the asymmetry of expertise between the corporate sectors, the consultancy sector, and the public administration make the public administration vulnerable, let's say, to their business strategy. And it is important to bear in mind, for the reasons that I told you before, that smart cities is not only about technical innovation. There need to be a political vision behind the way how technology is leveraged, okay? And what are the local needs that we want to address through technology? So this is actually one of the first important issues which is important to bear in mind about the development of smart cities, so about the use of tech innovation in urban environments. Another aspect which is interesting about smart city policies and with which we were concerned with a project we conducted with some researchers in Canada is the role of transparency and public suspicion in the development of smart city projects. We worked on this interesting project, the Sidewalk Lab project in Toronto. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe not. If not, it's because the project failed. And why the project failed? Because, so who was at the maneuver of the project? It was the municipality of Toronto with Sidewalk Lab, which is a Google affiliated society, basically. So it's part of the Google corporation. And the objective was to build a smart neighborhood, okay, through the use of sensors to make it sustainable on different levels: economic, social, and environmental, as I was mentioning before. But actually, the innovation process was governed through a PPP, a public-private partnership, with limited involvement of the inhabitants of the neighborhood concerned. Citizens, so the inhabitants of the neighborhood, repeatedly asked Google and the municipality to have access to the plans for the municipality, for the renewal of the neighborhood, and they repeatedly denied access to this data. This led to an increase in terms of suspicion towards how data were collected, how data were stored. So at the end of the day, there were concerns about privacy life concern and the use of this data. And much of the protest was leveraging this interesting work by Shoshana Zuboff, which is about surveillance capitalism. So the idea was, the protest campaign was leveraging this idea that tech innovation done in this way without any involvement of the public can become a threat to our freedom. Okay? So since I'm reaching the end, I go to the conclusion. The main conclusion is this, that we see, at least from a public policy perspective, two main challenges when we think of technological innovation in cities. The first is the administrative capacity of the public sector. If there is the staff and the administrations is not trained to deal with innovation, the risk is that their agenda is captured by the private sector. In this sense, we have launched this year, we're launching this training for public administrations on how to appropriate and adopt a public entrepreneurship approach to technological innovation, and namely digital innovation. And the second aspect, which is also interesting, is how to make the innovation process democratic, basically. How do we enable communication and innovation that involves citizens, public civil servants, so the public sectors, and the private sector, namely engineers. We know that research which has done on innovation, that doing this is very complex, because sometimes the participation is, as it is usually called in the literature, tokenistic. Tokenistic in the sense that people are consulted and you just do it basically for public communications and to boost the legitimacy of the project. So much of the challenge is to understand how we truly involve citizens in the innovation process nowadays. And I stop here. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you for your talk. Very interesting. Has anyone a question? Sorry.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. What can be said about the sustainability part of, for example, the research that you were showing about public administration switching to more like a technological office, and it's saving some money, and it's more efficient economically. But what can be said about sustainable development when you use this amount of data and amount of tech that we know now that it consumes a lot of energy and water. Yeah. So sustainable high-tech city seems sometimes like an oxymoron.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Actually, the question, as you ask it, if I reformulate from a policy perspective, the issue become, what is the policy coherence of smart cities? So it is true that you can tackle at the same time the environmental, the economic, and social aspect. I mean, it depends on the way how you assess the technology. And I think, at least in the field, in my research field, which is political science, it would be interesting to look at smart city policies from a life cycle assessment, considering the entire life cycle of the technology, not only at the moment of the application in the life of the administration, but actually the entire life cycle of the technology. And I think this would be a very nice research project, actually. Yeah. But thank you.
And about the answer that you just gave, at the beginning of the presentation, you talk about some comparisons which was more sustainable or less sustainable? And how do you assess that? How did you do that?
Okay, so thank you for the question. So the paper I showed is about the potential sustainability impact of smart city policies. So it's the potential, we don't know the actual sustainability impact. At least in policy research, there has been no study investigating what is the sustainability impact. So it is mobilized with arguments putting forward sustainability gains, but actual evaluation is still lacking. If you want, usually when we think of a public policy, we distinguish from the phase of agenda setting and design of the policy, then there is the implementation and evaluation. So our work has been particularly on the agenda setting, so how governments speak in their agendas about smart cities, the implementation, so the strategies to exploit strategic ambiguity. As I said, it would be very interesting to work more on the evaluation, on the actual impact of this, on these technologies.
And I think that this is on Europe, the impact, it's really targeted. In them framework, it's really important to evaluate the impact on the strategy that are developed on the different cities, on the different projects on Horizon. It's really important.
Okay.
I think that you have to be focused on the impact too.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no more questions, so we will have a break now and we see each other back at 3:15. So see you back then.